So, I think that we, at the moment, live in the most important country in the world, which is not an idea that I feel like many people share, arguably rightly. I mean, if you think about other countries that are out there that have a much bigger reach and impact than South Africa, which is the southernmost country in a continent that doesn't get a lot of positive attention. What about America? What about India? What about China? But South Africa really is the most important country in the world. And the reason for this is because it's a place where change not only can, but does happen. And we see that in all parts of life here, whether it's the really violent summer storms that transition into these bright, shiny days, and sometimes, unfortunately, vice versa. Or it's the diversity of people here with a make-a-plan attitude, and everything in between. It's really cool. It's very cool. But it has a lot of problems. We all know what the problems are. There's a broken education system, systematic inequality, rampant corruption, just to name a few. But problems remain problems without solutions. And here in South Africa, we have solutions. And I want to talk about one of those. South Africa has 11 official languages, which, as somebody who's not from South Africa, is mind-boggling to even contemplate, and is very unique. But what that really says about South Africans is that they like to talk a lot. So why not take this idea and this obsession and this fixation with talking and chatting and speaking and use it to plug the holes in society that lead to some of the most pressing issues that we face today. Issues like unemployment rates, limited opportunities, and ultimately inequality. So how? How does talking solve a massive social issue like inequality? Well, when we speak to people, especially people who are not like us, we open up information flows. And when we open up information flows, we make a thoroughfare for different ideas to flow between communities where previously they did not exist. And when that happens, we learn about opportunities. That learning about opportunities is a catalytic force in finding out about things that are going to allow us to get the tools, the training, the experience necessary to mitigate things like high unemployment rates, to moderate the massive economic segregation that we have in this country. So why is South Africa special? Why here? Why are we so important? I would say that Johannesburg, specifically, represents a microcosm of a much greater macrocosm. The problems that exist on the street in the city that you see every day are the same problems that eat away at the social fabric in New York, in Addis Ababa, and Mexico City, and Sydney, and London, and Tokyo. So what's the difference? Here, you can, and in fact you have to, confront them on a daily basis. Because of the proximity of our different communities, with different backgrounds, different languages, and different people, we're forced to look at these problems every single day. We're forced to engage with them and interact with them because they're as close as Alex and Santon, and as different, within a very short distance apart. In other parts of the world, it's just not the case. If you live in New York or Seattle, you can get up, go to work, you can drive, walk, take the bus, rain, come, shine, whatever, you can go to work, leave work, go to gym, go to your favorite after-work drink spot, go home, and you will have literally no idea that you're a tiny piece in a highly unequal ecosystem. And here, that's just not possible. You see, when you talk to communities of different backgrounds, and you open up these information flows, you do a number of things. Forming strong connections with people from a vastly different background than you reduces social tensions and economic inequality. It increases your chances of finding out about jobs, training opportunities. It increases your ability to save money, to plan for the future, to lay foundations for growth, or to start a business. In short, if we can just talk to each other more, we're going to open the door to many more opportunities to come. So why does this have to do with stories? Why are stories important? You see, in my experience, we create our identities based on narratives that we don't form ourselves, but that are given to us. And those narratives can be based on anything: your family history, where you live, the language that you speak, your religion. the experiences that you've had, but you don't choose those things. Those things choose you. And so what we do when we don't talk to each other is we have our identities and we hold them close. We build walls higher and higher and higher so that we can protect and ensure the security and the strength of the identities that we have been given. But we can't look outside the walls when that happens. And so the walls get in the way of the collaboration that we need, that is essential to solving problems like inequality. So for me, I started to think about this about 4 years ago, and that journey brought me to South Africa, which was great for me personally, and also because I got to engage with this issue more. So in 2010, I was sitting on a dusty road in rural North Spain in the pouring rain with no money, no Spanish, and 150 kilometers to walk to the nearest town. And I was not happy, unsurprisingly. And as I was sitting there on the side of the road, I started to think about why I was where I was, and I reflected properly for the first time in my life. And as I was doing that, I came to realize how totally alone I was in that moment, and how important it is for humans as individuals to connect with each other, whether that's people to people or community to community, friends, family, the places that you live. And then I started to think back about why and how people connect, and this idea of the narrative as a connecting force really came up for me. So I started to think about the narratives that I had embodied over time. And then I began to disassemble them. And what happened next would be a start of a very long journey. So to go back to the beginning, sort of, I was born in Stockport in North England, it's just by Manchester, to Jewish immigrant parents, which meant that right from being born, I inherited 3 narratives that I did not choose. I was English, I was Jewish, and I was an immigrant. And as I grew older, and my experiences diversified, those narratives would also diversify with them. So I became many things. I was a sister, a traveler, a dreamer. For a long time, I was an aspiring Manchester United central midfielder, but that didn't work out so well. And then my family began to move, and we went from city to city and country to country, and the narratives increased. And they became location-based. Suddenly, I found myself with literally a picture book that I could flip through and choose who I wanted to be that day. I could be English, I could be American, I could be French, I could be younger than everyone else, I could be the girl who looked different, I could be the sister, I could be anything that I wanted to be. But I started to realize that what I was doing is in every situation, I was just pulling pages from a book like you would do with cards. Say, today I'm going to be this person. And I realized as I was doing that I actually didn't like any of these narratives. And the reason I didn't like any of them was because I hadn't chosen any of them for myself. And so I started to think about this because I had been lucky enough to have the experience of many school systems and many political infrastructures and many societies. And what I was noticing was a common trend, that it didn't matter where you were, all these different groups existed, but none of them spoke to each other. And for somebody who embodied so many different identities, the lack of ability to speak to group to group to group just didn't make sense for me. So, much to my parents' chagrin, I decided that what I needed to do was to drop all of those narratives and run away for a while. So I started traveling to figure out who I was and what I wanted and what ultimately I should be personifying myself as. And I went to loads of places. I was all through Eastern Europe, South America, Canada, different parts of Africa, north, south, east, Mexico, Australia, and finally I ended up on that dusty road in rural North Spain. And I was sitting there, and I was in the rain, and I finally got up and started walking, and I was not happy about it. I decided, great, let me just drop all of these narratives and start again. And so I did. And in reflecting back on those experiences, the most important thing that I can tell you is that I learned 4 things. I had traveled and I had talked to many, many people from all over the world, and the key takeaways were this. 1, we live in a global community. Our problems and our issues are the same. It doesn't matter if you're from Mexico, South Africa, or Ethiopia. Your problems fundamentally are the same. 2, we can draw solutions from each other. If somebody innovates a solution to a problem in Japan, what's to stop us extrapolating that problem, adapting it, and using it to solve issues that we face on the ground in Johannesburg? Nothing. 3, It's important to see problems through each other's eyes. If we can understand that our similarities are greater than our differences, when we look out and we see the problems that we face, it'll be much easier for us to work together to solve them. And working together to solve them is the only way that we can figure out sustainable solutions. And finally, number 4, you have to see problems to be able to fix them. And here in South Africa, we can see problems, and that's why we're special. So when I left Spain, well, not immediately after I left Spain, but after I walked 150 kilometers, got on a plane, flew, blah, 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 I ended up in Johannesburg. And I knew within 3 months that I was in love with this city and I wasn't going to be able to leave very easily. And the reason for this was that Johannesburg presents the idea of the narrative and the story in a very urgent way that's different than anywhere else. You can walk along the streets here, as I was doing when I first arrived, and talking to different people, and you begin to realize that because we live in such a highly segregated society, yet a highly segregated and highly obviously segregated society, how you think about who you are is crucial to being able to realize that you can fix your situation. And in this country, it's particularly pressing. If you go to school in Alex, you'll go to a school that most likely will not have the resources as somebody down the road in Santon. That means the world is different in terms of difference of quality of education. If your quality of education is better, you're going to be able to get better jobs. Not only because the quality of education is better, but because the networks that you are exposed to through that education are going to allow you to learn about the opportunities that will allow you to find that job. That means that if you are from a band of society that sends children to good schools, you're going to stay in that band. And if you happen to be from a band of society that doesn't send students to good schools because of your location, because of your resources, because of your background, you're not going to be able to access this. And this is made worse by the walls that we build around the stories that we have. Because it's the simplest thing in the world to open up this flow of information. If we open up the flow of information, the student in Alex would also know about the opportunities that the student in Santon does. But we don't. We don't talk to each other. Now, why don't we? There's lots of reasons. Transport is difficult and costly, and distances are far. Languages are different. Culture is different. But most importantly, there's a social fear and perception. Because we build our walls higher and higher and higher, at a certain point it becomes very difficult to climb them and go over. And that's the most dangerous thing that we can do to each other. Because when we do that, we start telling each other stories. If you tell each other a story and you don't get to write your own, what happens is that you lose your ability to say, I know that I can seek, dream, achieve, realize. Because I'm from this area, and people from this area do, and we just don't do that. And that's dangerous. The quickest way to solve that problem is to input new information, to be a connector, to be a weak tie, as we call in social network analysis speak. It means that you come in here, you're a new person. You bring with you new information. You stepped out from outside your walls. And if you can do that, you stand a really real chance at opening this corridor of information flow. And it's the simplest thing in the world to do it. All we have to do is be brave. And being brave is all about being different. And if you can be different, and you can get the courage up to be the weak tie, and be the person that's going to go into the next community, it's going to make friends with somebody you didn't know before, then we're going to really start to see these walls breaking down. But all we have to do is literally take a deep breath and look around and go outside. Thank you.